catch their eye in a catalogue, and to, I suppose, explore some of the reasons for that. So yeah, as I say, from my side, I've enjoyed speaking to Greg so much, and again, looking forward to this evening. Naturally, it's very informal, but we do have a slide presentation, and Greg will sort of lead us through, and we'll make it quite conversational. But yes, looking forward to it very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Can you give me a thumbs up, Arisha, if my screen's up? Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, again, thank you so much, Greg. And I mean, should we kick off?
Yes, Doc, thank you. Wonderful to be here with the Strauss family again, and for everyone else who's joining us, also thank you for joining. It's lovely to see some friends joining us as well today. And Higgo, thank you, bro. I mean, you have you are taking care of my palette today. I had to dig deep into in my space to find something for tonight. So we could work lyrics with some of the really wonderful juices that we're going to talk about. But we'll talk about that later. What I do want to do though is start off with, I mean, when I looked at the catalog this time around, something came to mind, and it had a lot to do with the time that we're finding ourselves in. And I'm not really talking about COVID, but although a lot of it was highlighted by COVID or was brought to the surface by COVID, but I wanted us to look at women today. I wanted us to celebrate some of the most amazing women who, through their work, have expressed their voice, have been very, very powerful feminists who have changed the course of history with very little recognition. Voices that I think we need to revisit and sort of get ourselves to pay attention to a lot of the other voices that we may not be listening to. And I think gentlemen, it's safe to say that even on this talk, we need to recognize the fact that guys need to maybe take a little bit of a break and sit down for 1 second and just and listen. As being in the broadcast business, I know very well about the inability to listen because you are always broadcasting. You're the one always talking. But I thought we pay some homage to some really incredible women whose work I think speak to me, and they teach me a lot about the power of women and what women can do. And we're going to start off with I call her Dr. Gogo because we call her Gogo, we call her Granny. But you can't also ignore the fact that Dr. Mahlangu is an accomplished artist. And today the theme that I wanted to touch on, where her work is concerned, was she took a culture which even amongst the Black African cultures is seen as very small and marginalized. The Ndebele are broad in terms of the many different Nguni combinations that you find in within that culture, and I'm also embarrassed to say that as an African and a South African, and I have a lot of friends who come from the Ndebele tribes, but I know very little about the Ndebele culture, except to say that Dr. Mahlangu really brought it in front of us. She took what would have been small and marginalized and really created world-class art, which is now celebrated globally. I mean, we've seen some of her works, and some of her collaborations with major brands, BMW to name one, and doing some really great exhibitions. But her power in bringing across what seemingly is a small voice into such a global stage is a power that we need to recognize. And Doc, I know you've got quite a few of her works in your collection, and a lot of her works would go up for auction. But these are obviously some of my favorites. And I know you know quite a bit. You've done a lot of work around Dr. Gogo, as I call her. Your feelings about her expression and her celebration of her culture, her heritage?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, Greg, you sort of hit the nail on the head, that she's been able, through what seems to be relatively simple means, to create this incredible international explosion. She really has been almost the sole force in terms of the Ndebele culture being immediately recognized around the world. And yes, of course, you mentioned her links to BMW, and of course those landmark work she did with decorating vehicles and everything. But I kind of agree. It's absolutely remarkable that a woman that seemingly is so humble and gentle and quiet has made such an enormous visual impact across the world. And I mean, I absolutely love that. In terms of her actual work, yes, it's instantly recognizable. We think immediately about the sort of Ndebele walls. And I love the fact that she's essentially reduced that to a living room scale. So you're able to get a piece of that aesthetic, in your own living room. And yes, you use the word celebratory. That's exactly how I think of her and her work. It's just explosion of joy. I think all her work really radiates that.
But I think even more special, the fact that I see her very actively sharing this knowledge. She teaches a lot of younger women, across the country. Not only about the culture, but also about the work, again, which shows the spirit of women when in a position of influence, and what they do with it is something to learn from. I think very similar to our next one, Doc, Penny Siopis. I mean, yeah. We'll come back to Prela. I know you love Prela a lot.
No, I just had a few slides in case it sort of veered off that way, but yeah.
I mean, and there is some correlation between those two, but just sticking with the, with the ladies.
Yes.
Penny, I mean, I got familiar with her work quite recently, actually, and her fascination with Sarah Butner. What I couldn't figure out was her fascination with Sarah what really brought about the feminist spirit in her, or was it vice versa? Was it just there tinkering and it just kind of started to come to light when she was chasing Sarah, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean that I don't know. I don't know which came first. I would imagine she was always that way inclined. She's been an artist that has always been about redressing the past. The kind of forces that are so prevalent now are the kind of themes she was dealing with. As an art student or an artist fresh out of art school. In the 80s. She was a whole generation ahead of her time in terms of looking back and redressing past ills, using historical issues from the past to make a very clear judgment, on the present. So I think that was always her sort of her driving force. I wouldn't say she was always an out-and-out political artist, but I think she was and remains a very serious artist. Cultural issues have always been, a major part of her work.
But what I like more though is that, so whilst her work is very serious, but in her expression of this seriousness, and I guess, for me, and I mean, I will not have this conversation with you guys and not bring in music. And And for me, she's like the Lebu Matosa, you know. If and I would implore you guys to go, you know, look up a group called Boom Shaka, and then, you know, just segue into Lebu Matosa.
Okay.
She was a feminist. She was, you know, a very strong woman who dealt with very harsh conditions, but expressed them in a vibrant sort of way. Took very complex subjects and themes around, you know, around love, around being a woman. You know, when you talk about redress, when you talk about equality, you know, those types of things are some of the themes that you know were on Lebu's mind, having known her and kind of spoken to her and just listened to some of her music. But it's dance music, you know. It's celebratory. When you listen to it without paying attention, you miss a lot of these things. And I guess, you know, for me, Penny's presentation of Sirius is also very palatable and enjoyable. And that's, I mean, I really appreciate that about
Yeah,
this
I mean,
so,
absolutely. I mean, this picture, you know, whether you know about its background or not, is just strikingly beautiful.
Absolutely.
You know, this incredible sort of carpet sort of shimmering with yellows and reds and oranges, sort of in and out of shadow, the sculptural figure, which is, you know, pretty much a very attractive self-portrait, this sort of door opening up and this sort of eerie light coming in. It's an incredibly dramatic kind of a work. And yes, at a flash, it is wonderfully intricate and beautiful. And you're absolutely right. She's able to deal with heavy topics in such interesting, vibrant ways.
Very interesting. I love that work, Stock. I mean, I think it's incredible. And I mean, like I said, you know, if you go back to Dr. Gogo, not, you know, just, you don't have to go back. But what I'm saying is that, you know, when you think about her works and you think about artistry, you know, there's a young woman today known as Shoma Josie, who's also taken what was regarded a very small tribe, very small culture, and put it on a global map. You know, she did that John Cena song, and, you know, became an instant, you know, global hit. I reference these themes because, again, these are different voices of different women in different eras, using their God-given artistic form, but also just the natural, you know, way of caring and just nurturing into these works, but a much more needed, you know, sort of theme and mood and spirit amongst people. You know, this country, if you think about, you know, just our politics and how, you know, people are surviving lockdown. A lot of us are taken care of, you know, by women in one way or the other. And a lot of the works that I picked today speak to a lot of those themes. You know, our next one, you know, Makamo, I mean, her works are so detailed. But what I enjoyed about her, which is something I picked up, was just how she combines mythical figures, and I know that her interest is, you know, almost kind of like an ancient Africa, pre-colonial, pre-Christianity, you know. So she's about origins, she's about, you know, where it all began, but brings it out in such a vibrant contemporary fashion that speaks to, you know, sort of new issues and new people. And it's quite a large piece of work too, Doc. I mean, and, you know.
Yeah, this is a very large canvas. Also, it's a very solid, serious item. You know, of course, you know, you spoke about her, you know, the detail of her work. She uses an enormous amount of oil paint, you know, to create this this very textured surface. You know, in many ways, it's sculptural. You know, if you look at it from you know, from side on or from an angle, you see all these peaks and troughs of these these paint drops and globules. And yes, it's a form of pointillism, you know, which allows her to use sort of pure color to create, you know, to to the eye, looking from a distance, a more modulated sort of chiaroscuro effect. But closer up, it's just mesmerizing. The other thing I love about her technique is also how it changes throughout the day, because it has a physical presence. Shadows and light play a massive role. In a work like this. But I have to say that when you talk about her mythologies, particularly of sort of various origin myths or everything, if I'm completely frank, a lot of that goes over my head. I don't often understand the kind of mythology she's working with. Of course, a work like this doesn't come with a explanatory pamphlet. So I tend to react to something like this purely on a visual level, and I feel a little frustrated sometimes because I know there's so much happening in this picture, and quite difficult to crack for me.
But and you're absolutely right, Doc. And I mean, a lot of artists who are of Mahelen's caliber, and just the people that they are, I think is where the answers lie. I mean, I know that if you dig into her own background, she left school quite early, and spent a lot of her time as a domestic. And in fact, again, an incredible intersection of women. She expressed painting, as something, or she expressed her interest in painting when the German lady that she was working for, Heidi, had picked up painting. And so she bought her the paints. And I mean, again, an incredible story of two women from very vast backgrounds, sharing ideas, sharing resources. When you look at a lot of her works, I mean, even that work that you've got up now, expresses the power and strength of women, and the nurture and the caring. I mean, that figure just on the right with how she's just holding the baby and how the baby's just so comfortably, sleeping there, and thinking of her story of when she, had to, stop everything in her own livelihood to go take care of her grandmother, another woman who had raised her. I mean, all of these connections are just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And there's a very strong sort of matriarchal force in so many of her works. I was lucky enough to go and visit this amazing retrospective for Masabidi at the Norval Foundation. I think it was 2018 or maybe last year, 2019. And that's a real sense you get, all these, very powerful, if quiet, hugely important and influential mother types or matriarchal figures.
No, incredible.
Yeah, I think she's an extraordinary artist.
No, it's her work is just really, really incredible. And last but not least, I mean, on our celebration of amazing women is Marjorie Wallace, who she took that novel Kennis van die Aand, right?
Yes, yes.
Which is it Knowledge of the Night, if loosely translated?
I think so. Although I would probably need my colleague Wilhelm to really pull out all the details. But yes, I think so. I mean, it was translated into English too.
Yes.
I think it was
the English translation is called Looking on Darkness.
Oh yeah, thanks Wilhelm. Yeah, looking on
thank
darkness.
You for that.
Into darkness.
I was a little worried that my father needs to go back and collect his school fees from my high school there.
Yeah.
By Afrikaanse Bedrasti. But I mean, again, another deep story. The image from afar is very beautiful, is colorful, is vibrant. I mean, you can, you can clearly pick out, the geography. When I look at a lot of the works, for instance, whether it's Peter Clark, or the resemblance in color, how the Western Cape is captured in different parts of the era. You can pretty much pick that up. But what was sad for me. Obviously, the story is quite sad. This is a man who's a colored man who's in love with a white woman, but sees no future, and kills her. I mean, I haven't read the novel. I mean, I just picked up this visual, and I was very interested in it, and I obviously got to learn about the book. But I don't know why the woman had to die. But then again, a story around how you get to a point where there's another prominent role which a woman takes, which talks to another very unfortunate part of our history, and bringing that theme back into play. I mean, how much of this piece, Doc, do you know, and can you share some ideas there?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, that's sort of the tragic story, and you get a sense of that deep desperation when you look carefully at this work. But
yeah.
I do love the point that you've already made very clearly, how so many of these works on the surface seem so wonderfully decorative and bright, and exciting on the surface, with all these sort of pink headscarves and the sort of decorative sort of rug on the right. And then the more you look at them, and the more you make the historical connections, the more serious a work you realize this is. Marjorie Wallace, I'm so delighted you selected one of her works, because she is so underrated and underappreciated. I think a lot of us just look at a Marjorie Wallace and just see it as a nice, happy interior scene, relatively simplified, bright colors. But she was a very serious painter, again dealing with very serious issues. And yes, she was sort of linked to that group of zestigers, those Afrikaans literary figures in the 1960s, like Andre Brink and Breyten Breitenbach, who were essentially attacking the apartheid regime through their literature. And I mean, Kennis van die Aand was the first novel, I understand, to be banned by the state in 1973-74 when it was published. And there's this very, very serious undertone in a work like this. And again, without knowing the story, if you were approaching it from a different perspective, maybe an international perspective, of course, you get a sense of all these mourning women, a priest or a husband sitting at a bedside, waiting for this much loved woman to die. So on that front, it's an enormously powerful painting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had, a flurry of emotions just thinking about, how, what is meant to be simple and enjoyable, that being love, was made so difficult, in certain times, and by law, really, really incredible, but beautiful works nonetheless. And thank you for introducing Marjorie to me. I'm certainly interested in seeing a lot of her other works and just getting through some of the other stuff that she's done. That one on the right, the blue one, I liked as well. That's oranges is very sweet.
Oh, it's fantastic. Now I have to just digress very quickly, just to give it some international context. Marjorie Wallace she lived most of her life in South Africa, but she was born in Edinburgh, and she went to the Edinburgh School of Art. And her great hero most likely would have been someone like Samuel Peploe, and I'm showing you one of his works on the left. And look at those very sort of geometricized oranges, being peeled at the sort of angular bowls and vessels. And again, to put into kind of financial context, this Peploe sold, I think, at a Christie's sale a while ago, and it made just short of £1 million. So that's over 20 million rand. And when you compare it to this wonderful woman, man, and oranges at what, 28,000 rand, you wouldn't necessarily think there was such a big quality difference.
I mean, Marjorie's works remind me of, and you and I have had this conversation quite a few times, of George Pember's works, which
Yes.
we both agree, should be sitting at, quite
Considerably higher.
price points. And to see that this is quite similar is very interesting. But I guess, an opportunity nonetheless, for
Absolutely.
for some of us who are sitting here and getting to see these works early. So a wonderful treat indeed. And I think that first part concludes our celebration of some of the most powerful women. But this theme is going to run across all of the presentations that we're going to share. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about Ati's work now. In fact, maybe we do that now, Doc.
Oh, you want to do Ati? Okay, perfect.
And I mean, I again, find him fascinating. Just his, expression of color. He's multi-talented, works across all types of media. Some of the works that he's put together, very bold, very expressionary. But what I enjoyed the most was a quote I read, which, and I'll give a loose translation of it, where he's not bound by biology, geography, and other themes that seek to define us or box us in a particular space. I quite enjoyed it. It's quite a description of freedom in a sense. Doc, would you agree?
Yeah, yes, I would. I would absolutely. I mean, he is exactly that, just entirely free in the way he works and the themes he works with. And there's a real sense of, excitement around any project he undertakes. There seems to be no limits in terms of, as I say, the themes he works with or how he tries to get them across. And yes, he's not, a traditional painter or anything like that. He works, in tapestries, he works in performance, he works in installations, and he works in what would ordinarily seem a more traditional medium, which is, sculpture or busts, bust portraiture, like the one I'm showing you here. But yes, there's a real sense of liberation in how he works, and complete fearlessness in how he attacks things.
Absolutely, and I mean, I love that. I enjoy that. That his work is very soft but very bold. Quite somewhat confrontational, I guess, in some ways, but also has that level of delicacy in it, which is really incredible. And I think, Higgo, I just want to bring you in here before we jump on to some of these boys who are on the scene, but maybe to raise a glass to all the ladies who've given us some incredible work, all the women and many other that we can talk about late into the night. Irma Stern, I mean, I looked at some of her works and thought it would be incredible one day to just have a whole conversation about the work that she does. But also kind of looking at these other sort of women who I draw sort of parallels to, and yes, really quite a beautiful celebration of their works and very thankful. But from here now to Kanun Cop.
So let me just get that up.
Higgo, I had to, I will not tell you what I had to do. I had to dig very deep in the bellies of places, within my house, of course. I think the president said we can enjoy a glass if we already had it at home, right? So I already had this at home. I think I need to declare that. I decanted a 2017 Polsal, but what was fascinating for me about this wine, I mean, apart from just its sheer delicious taste and the many accolades that it's won, is, I mean, it's arguably probably the first highest scored South African Bordeaux blend. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And good evening, everybody. Before I answer that question, I've scribbled down a few thoughts that I'm hoping I'll be able to get back to. But let me just say, I'm a Boom Shaka fan enough myself, and I enjoy that you're saying it's about time to listen to Boom Shaka. It's always about time, eh? or maybe just it's about time to listen. Hey, Greg, that's to connect to what you're saying about the salute to the women out there. I completely agree, and you always have a way to catch me off guard, because had I known that you're going to want to talk about powerful and contributing women in the industry, I would have picked 3 different producers perhaps for our sale. There aren't many women to talk about, unfortunately, at Kanonko. But nevertheless, remarkable wines. Now, I'm just saying that on a light note. But listen,
Paul Sauer had a mom.
Yes.
So let's leave it there.
Yes, 100%. So the 2017 Paul Sauer has just been released now, and very interestingly, one wouldn't want to be too bold and say that our very good price results with the 2015 has had an effect. I think Kanonkorp has a very long-term view and a very conservative price strategy, but the 2017 has seen quite an increase on price with release. And plenty serious commentators are saying that this is at least as good as the 2015. If not perhaps better. Now, the vintage that you're referring to that had the very good score was 2015 vintage, of course, being awarded 100 points by Tim Atkin. But that certainly isn't the only or the first full 100-point score received by a serious international critic. But we've had significantly high scores given by significant critics for plenty of red wines in South Africa, and we've had full mark scores for sweets given before as well. So I just want to put that into context. But I think perhaps with the international, you spoke about Esther Mahlangu's impact, international explosion, and the impact of her work earlier. The Paul Sauer 2015, the 100 points, and what happened on the secondary market with us playing a small role in that, has certainly seen an international explosion for serious collectible South African red wine. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, really, really incredible. I was looking at a couple of there's a couple of lots here. Do you want to talk a bit about how many there are and what else do we have for the auction?
Yeah, we've got around 130 lots on wine lots. They all made up of either Kanonkorp, Boekenhoutkloof, and Klein Constantia. You can see there the bulk of them coming from Boekenhoutkloof and Kanonkorp. It's an absolute embarrassment of riches of wines from those 3 producers. They literally are the best of the best, and with a view on older vintages as well. With Kanonkorp, what's wonderful about these producers is the focus that they do. Something else that I scribbled down here earlier. You spoke about freedom, not being bound by geography. That's something where there's a bit of a contrast with wine. You can't not be bound by your geography in wine. These producers very much communicate where they are and where they're from. Kanonkorp being Stellenbosch, probably almost personifying Stellenbosch. Klein Constantia, of course, Constantia, and with all the heritage of the sweet wine of Constantia. And then Boekenhoutkloof in Franschhoek, of course. But the Kanonkorp sale, we focus on everything that they do, and luckily that's a small amount of wine because they are so specialized. They do pinotage, and they do Cabernet Sauvignon, and they do the blend, the Bordeaux blend, which is of course the Paul Sour that we've been speaking about. But there's a lot there. I think it's lot number 50. Al, if you can bring that up, because I do want to pause on that. Lot number 53, no, 54.
Is that the
Just
black?
type in 54. This is a remarkable lot. I mean, this is a lot that took my breath away when I went to inspect it in the cellar. This is a private collector that's bought ever since 1988 up until 2006. So this is it's 3 decades of, and they're Jeroboams, so they're 5 liters, immaculate condition. They've never left the cellar. You can see there they've got the wrapping around them. That's how they've been wrapped. So the labels are impeccable. So this is really, it's almost like I mean, few would argue that Paul Sour is, if not at least one of South Africa's best red wines, if you consider the provenance and the consistency and the backdating. So this is all the way back to 88, and then you have to realize that it only started in 1980, the Paul Sour.
Yeah.
So it's really a remarkable collection, 19 vintages of 5 liters. You're going to need some friends to drink it with. Greg, I think if you buy this one, you won't be digging for your Paul Sours. They'll be in your face. But this is incredible. It's really a remarkable lot.
Yeah, sure. And what's the starting price on that? I didn't see where the bid was.
Yeah, we put an estimate in there. I can't remember off my top of my head now. Yeah, 200 to 250, which, you know, it might seem excessive, but if you just work it back, there's 19 vintages in there, so that means 10,000 Rand a bottle. If you get it on low estimate.
When you said 200 or 250, I got excited there. I was reaching for my pocket.
No, but still, I mean, if you calculate that back, 10,000 Rand for a 5-liter bottle, I mean, you know, that's 2,000 Rand a liter, so it's less. It's so 750 mil, 1,500 Rand. You know, that's the 2015 vintage. We're currently estimating to be worth between 3,000 and 5,000 Rand. I think the coming auctions will tell us exactly where that price point sits, but conservatively 3,000 Rand. So if you're then paying 1,500 Rand a bottle for meticulously stored, all of these wines are going to be in perfect drinking condition. They're just going to be different because of the vintages. So, but we'll see. We don't know, because this is almost, I said earlier in our Monday talk, this is almost something that a museum should buy. But hopefully there are these sort of collectors out there. But it's just a beautiful slice of history of South African red wine.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm you know, I was very tempted when I looked at it, but you know, it isn't just buying wine. You're right. It's buying history. And almost like, you know, should be, you know, preserved for a very long time. So I guess a collection like this would be wasted with me, because every time the president decides to shut the taps, I'll be looking at this collection and thinking, I feel like an 89 on a random Tuesday, and I'll probably deeply regret that, you know, later on in life. But I guess
you feel like 5 liters of an 89 on a random Tuesday.
Look, we'll have to do a Zoom call with like a lot of people, and you know, I don't know, but yeah. Just to get back to some of the works, and I want to segue now into Sam, Doug. I mean, this guy is one of my ultimate favorite guys. You know, I think, you know, I've considered myself very lucky in the sense that, you know, you live in a time where a lot of, you know, really great artists are still alive, you know, and you can reach out and touch them. You can, you know, go to their studios and see their work. You know, you can phone them, you know. I mean, I often imagine, you know, those days when, you know, Miles Davis was hanging out with Picasso in, you know, in Italy. You know, I suppose, I mean, you know, we ain't no Miles, but we do have, you know, greats at the level of Picasso that we have access to. And Sam is quite a is quite a serious storyteller, both through his work, but also personally. What I enjoy the most, though, is his record collection is incredible. I mean, you almost feel a soundtrack to all the works that he does. But the particular piece I chose, I've been chasing this piece for a long time. Brenda and I ran around many shows, looking for this piece, and somehow we were always like 5,000 rand short or something. And and here it comes again. And I mean, again, a very deep, serious story. Clive van der Berg, does beautiful work that talks about mines. So does Sihlali, all of these people who've kind of lived around the mining towns of Johannesburg. And this particular piece, I mean, what an incredible piece of work. And yeah, I mean, I will be bidding for this one. So I guess I'm trying to threaten people here who are
scare them off. Yeah, well, I mean, Greg, I agree with you, and I think you're right about Sam as a man. I'm also lucky enough to have met him and spent some time with him, and he's the most incredible man. It's just this gentle but incredibly well-rounded sort of artistic mind. And yes, you mentioned his record collection, which is outrageous. But I mean, when you think about sort of his personality and marry it to some of these works, it definitely gives them extra power. And again, he has a very broad range in terms of how he works. If you look at works like this on the back of his sort of studio wall here, there's a lot of painting, there's a lot of collage, there's a lot of sort of pop culture being integrated physically into his work. But, these mining series or these minor series works, to me are a lot more weighty, a lot more serious. And of course, you can pull out so many threads in terms of racial segregation, subterranean, out in the light. These are very serious works. Also, they speak directly to a local history, the Witwatersrand and Johannesburg, and how that wealth has been built. Usually on the backs of these kind of workers underground. Just simply visually, this is a remarkable work in terms of getting a real sense of being underground, dark, dank, humid, cold, miserable. You do get that sense. And then these incredible torchlights, from the helmets. I mean, it looks like they are lit with electricity. And to me, that is technically quite special.
It's an incredible piece. In fact, he did another similar work, which was a sketch. In fact, there was two. So one was a group of people queuing. And then another was a group of children in the same sort of formation, almost like they were in assembly, but it was a queue formation, and just the themes that you bring across, just in terms of, how the system of apartheid created order, and how that order was, reinforced, and just people behavior, which also then spoke to how people then had to present themselves, how your confidence is also affected by, kind of like being, sort of, streamlined in a particular way. But nonetheless, how, significant the story behind all of these images are. I mean, I really love this work, and I just want to take this moment and maybe take back everything I've said about Sam. He's a lousy artist. It's not worth it. Please don't try and bid against this one. There's other good works. Let's go to some really cool young people. Nelson. That's my boy.
Just before you go on to Nelson, you have to acknowledge that Sam is married to the coolest girl in town.
Oh yes,
very clever.
I was afraid to say, because guys, you never know how they feel when you say that about their wives,
Like I said, Maureen is one of the coolest girls in town. She's fantastic.
Maureen is amazing. Love her to bits. So I mean, here's another young fella who took us global at an instant, very quickly. I mean, it was only 2 years ago. When Nelson won that Rise Art Prize, he came out to my office. We celebrated. We went across to Marble and had a very long dinner, long night. Celebrating just what seemed to be a beginning, but very quickly a massive explosion, occurred of, his work. But in particular, what I want to talk about with regards to his works, and I'll talk a bit about the piece that I chose for today, but and in line with women, I mean, this piece, shows almost what looks like a march or a protest of sorts, and yet there are these smiles, on these women's faces. We know protest to be about not smiles, but particularly what I loved about this piece, it reminded me of a piece I was that I love very much, that Gerard Sekoto did, which is Lady in a Blue Dress. And I was quite fascinated that generations apart, here are two people, two artists who have taken this woman, this figure, and put her in a blue dress and made her shine and just be incredible. And I mean, that piece of work is just really amazing. Another thing that no one should be bidding on, really.
I agree with you, Greg. I mean, this is a very strong work. It's a slightly earlier work. I think he's maybe better known in the mainstream for works like this. Laughing Children with sort of big glasses over their eyes and sort of big beaming smiles. This work's a little bit earlier. I think maybe a little more weighty, a little more serious. Yeah. I also look at this kind of work and see so much potentially happening. It's the kind of what that art historians just sort of sink their teeth into. I mean, you mentioned the idea of a protest, yet these figures are lively and happy and positive and healthy. You get a sense of a history being written, in that moment. These newspaper clippings or pages being strewn sort of at their feet. The idea of this billboard, this white blank billboard, behind them. This an opportunity to write a new history or a new future. So to me, there's a whole lot of hope and excitement in a work like this. Purely aesthetically, if I look further back at various influences, yes, there's an element of someone like William Kentridge locally, who had such an enormous and has such an enormous influence, over artists, especially from the Artist Proof Studio, which is where, of course, he came from. But also internationally, I think of someone like Jean-Michel Basquiat. These little markings, these doodles, these thoughts, which is very much part of that sort of urban energy that Nelson also picks up on.
I mean, it's quite beautiful to note, all of these influences, but also to kind of watch how that work has developed into what we now know him for. So almost like an artist that, found inspiration, to search for themselves and went on and discovered, what truly makes them, which is quite incredible. But what I love about the works that he's known for is his subtle presentation of beauty, power, and prowess of women. I mean, that's work that showed on Time magazine.
Time magazine, yeah.
You know, was and I think a lot of people saw, you know, a piece of work, you know, by Nelson, which is, you know, his classical, you know, young girl figure. But what most people didn't realize was that, you know, when you look deep into her eyes, what you see is, you know, the image of the Union buildings, and the story of that is that, you know, we live in a country, you know, that you know, in spite of its challenges, possibilities are there. You know, young girls can dream of being president, and these, you know, figures that he puts together are just incredible and empowering from that perspective, and, you know, giving power to young people in the most delicate, most subtle way that does not confuse but inspire. You know, for me is really amazing, and I appreciate that about his work. I mean, you know, I managed to, you know, get 1, 2, 3 of his works in the early days before, you know, he made the big time. So yeah. I'm holding on to the ones that I have, and
yeah, before
yeah,
Oprah Winfrey started buying up his pictures.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, so really exciting. But and maybe before we jump on to the granddaddy, you know, to one of my old-time most favorite people, and there's plenty to say about, you know, the chosen artwork. You know, Higgo, maybe we can you know, take this conversation to Buchanot.
Now, Higgo, I think you might still be on mute.
Yeah, maybe. It's maybe a little commercial break if you have a glass. Cheers.
Higgo, are you there?
Yeah, I think he's on mute.
We'll give him another
Higgo?
few seconds. No, you're still on mute, I'm afraid, Higgo.
Can Arisha unmute him?
I'll unmute you.
Oh, okay.
It's sort of not allowing me to unmute.
Oh.
Oh,
okay. Well, I mean.
Well, Greg, should we go on to Sekoto, and we'll wait for Higgo to come back?
It should be working.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yes.
Sorry guys, my for some reason just at that moment my laptop screen was acting up, so I couldn't find the unmute. But yeah, I'm here. Sorry, Greg.
No worries.
So,
no worries.
Buchanot's Glove. Yeah,
yes.
We've. I spoke earlier about what they, you know, the focus of the producers. We were blown away. We were able with the Buchanot's Glove wines, which was a great initiative from them. They've put up each and every wine that's being sold on this auction. They've opened a bottle of each of it, and Roland and I went to taste them a couple of weeks ago. So we've got updated tasting notes and ratings on all of the Buchanot's Glove wines that's coming up on the sale. And the probably the big comment that we took out of that tasting a couple of weeks ago was how they're able to perform at the top level with a white wine, Syrah, and Cabernet Sauvignon, and a Bordeaux red blend, and a sweet wine. They sort of industry leaders in all of these categories, which I don't think many, if any, other producers in the country is able to do. So Buchanot's Glove was, interestingly now, I mean, they seem to be an established brand, aren't they? But they really are a new South African wine brand. They were formed and started in 1994. And then with a wine like this, is this the 97? So Alastair, maybe bring up the 97 Syrah. There's a one bottle lot of the 97 Buchanot's Glove Syrah. This wine really put them on the map. 3 years after they came into existence, basically, they just blew the lights out with this wine that got Platter 5-star which at the time, it's still hard to come by, but there's just more good wines. To be honest, there's more good wines on the scene at the moment than there were in the late 90s. So there's more Bladder 5 stars now, but this was probably one of a handful at the time. It won the Tri-Nations. It just really was the wine that Mark Kent it got him noticed. And
is it this one, Higgo? You say that the 2009. Okay, great.
Yeah. No. Sorry, 1997. There's only one bottle. Sorry, Alastair. 97 Syrah. So that's now 23 years old. It really just blew the lights out. Also because it was a completely different style than what was produced at the time. In the 1990s. Can you find it? There's just a single bottle lot. The reason there's only one bottle on is there's less than 20 bottles that we know of in existence. So if there's anybody out there listening that has a bottle of this, you really sell it to us quite easily. We'd be interested in getting it off you. The winery doesn't. The winery has, I think, 10 or 15 bottles of it left. So this is one of those remarkable wines from Buchenholz. And the reason what I was saying earlier, it deviated from style in the late 90s. South Africa was making. We were sort of following those Parker ratings and trying to compete with Australia. And at the time, the theme was sort of the bigger the better. You know, if you're making a wine, you extract it, you whack it with new wood, you're getting like a lot of volume and noise into a bottle of wine. And this was a deviation from that style in that it was more Northern Rhone-like. And they've continued along that thread. But yeah, this wine is still very much alive, very, very lively, lots of acidity, lots of perfume. It's just a staggering example. So yeah, and also interestingly, the wine came from Somerset West, so cool climate. They started. It's now a parking lot where the vineyard used to be, so it's really is a once-off.
What a waste! A whole parking lot.
Since '98, they went to Wellington and subsequently went to Swartland. It's now completely wine of origin Swartland.
Yeah.
This was the single vintage was from Somerset West. So it really is a unique bottle of wine. And then maybe if I can touch on one more wine, because I realize we don't have that much time. I do have to mention just the others. I mean, they're just as famous for their cab as they are for their Syrah. But if you can just find the 2004 Semillon, so it'll be further up. So there's only 3 lots. There's only a handful of lots of the white. There we go. So the first one, the 2004. There we go. So this wine, I've put in a lot of effort to try and make, especially in my days in the restaurant business and so forth, to try and make consumers aware of the ageability of South African white wine. Now, if you need a wine to convince you, this will be one of them. So this was the very first wine we tasted in this tasting that I just spoke of, that we had a few weeks ago. I think my rating and my tasting notes will be on here a little bit further down on the screen. It just completely took my breath away. It's if I didn't see the bottle being opened in front of me, I wouldn't have believed that it's a 2004 Semillon. It's just, it's incredible. The freshness of the wine, the structure. You don't need to think that, okay, I'm buying an older bottle of white and therefore I have to sort of take into account that it's going to be a little bit ropey because it's old. This wine will compete with freshness with the current release. It's just a real little gem. So if you're a fan, I mean, the Semillon, it also comes. The reason it ages so well, it comes from one of the oldest vineyards in the country. So Franschhoek has these old vines of Semillon. So the age of the vine means concentration and power in the wine. So you don't have to color it in with all sorts of other elements like oak or lees contact. It just the wine has power to last. So this will be an incredible wine to buy.
Yeah, no, that's some exciting stuff, and I think whoever buys has to promise an invitation I mean, in the way you describe it, Higgo,
Yeah, I know. Now I'm so desperate to taste it.
let's all agree we're all friends in this call. You know, we should
we must all
share
share.
somebody.
If you just scroll of the screen, it should be there on the critic ratings. If you scroll down.
Oh, there we go.
See it?
All right.
There we
Yeah,
go.
so you gave it 98, I see, Higgo.
So this is not something I do lightly, hey, or often. I mean, it really is one of the most remarkable white wines I've drunk from South Africa. It's it's wonderful.
That's incredible. That's awesome, man. And I think on that age theme, very good time to move on to Granddad. This incredible man. I mean, again, Doc, you never cease to surprise me. I mean, I feel like I should, after lockdown, every week come and pay you a visit there at Strauss and just walk around and see what else you've got hidden in that space.
Yeah.
This work, again going back to that theme of women. I know you've got that big color version of it, Doc. If we could show that,
yeah.
Because I think the more I look at it, the more themes come across, and we'll come back to Wash Day, but I just want to focus on this for 1 second. So, back in the day, in the hood, there was a thing called, we would say we were checker. And your checker came from, checking on someone. But it's not just anybody. So when you go see your girlfriend, we your checker. So you're going to check on your girlfriend. And you never go, you don't go into their house, right? Because, that's considered a very dangerous move because, no father wants some boy coming into their house for their daughter. So, you'd either whistle or you'd always have an appointment to meet at some corner, in the early evening at sunset, which is why I love sunset so much because I never got to check her that much. And you would, and this would be the scene. Now, what's beautiful about this image is that it tells so many stories, so for anyone who's been somewhere to go and check, your checker, would know that these things come with, quite a few things. And I mean, I don't know about this image and what and who the visitor is, but I've taken my own interpretation to it. Here's a man who's very happy to see this woman. He stands there very confidently trying to look cool, because it's also important, when you go see a woman that you like, a girl that you like, confidence is everything. You've got to come bearing gifts. I'm guessing, in that basket there's probably some fruit or something that is brought for her. You don't just go see, again, a girl that you like and bring nothing. And she probably had to leave home with an excuse, which is why there's that little boy, that she's holding there. And in the way that she's holding him, he really wants to go, but she's not letting him go. Because if he gets home first, he will have to say where he left her, and she would have to explain. And in the way she holds her dress, her skirt rather, you can tell that she's also smitten by this fella, and really sort of likes. I mean, there was a thing about girls drawing maps on the floor when you talk to them, just in the way they would move their foot across the floor as they had a conversation, with someone that they really, really liked. I love how she's, just clenching on her skirt there while she talks to the guy. But although you see a side profile, and this, demeanor of, a woman who's in love, who's smitten, she's also a very powerful figure, because her mouth shows, command in her speech, but in almost like the most delicate way ever. which has, Mr. Man's attention over there. And that's why he's like really trying to act cool throughout the whole time. And she's holding this little boy. So here you've got, little boys of different ages under the spell of one woman. And she's like getting her moment, which for me was just, it blew me away. I just thought, what a powerful image and so many stories, just in that one picture. I really, really love it. And if that was not the story, from today, that's the story. Let's leave it there, Doc. What do you say?
Yeah.
You and I
Absolutely. I mean, I've pretty much got nothing to add. I mean, that was such a wonderful interpretation of it. Yeah, fantastic. You sort of hit the nail on the head.
I love it. I mean, it's so, it's such an important moment.
Yeah.
And I think, again, going back to, the relationship between men and women, and, how when the care is right, and, the treatment is with the respect and the delicacy that it deserves. I mean, it's everything. And when you go to Wash Day, Doc, and I know we almost out of time, but again, Wash Day is, that image on the left is, another story of how women took care of the household. I mean, I'm not sure what that guy over there is doing, standing there. Looks like he's just like,
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing. I mean, it looks like he has a sort of a fez on or something. And
I mean,
yeah,
geez,
it's difficult to get a sense of what he's up to. You're right.
But the women, young and old, are hard at work. Again, just the role of women in society. And I mean, Opa Gerald, as I'd like to call him, had this way of, expressing life, primarily that Sophia Town era. He's probably the one person who's artistically documented Sophia Town better than anyone I know. I mean, across everything that I've read,
Absolutely.
and anything that I've seen, I mean, he's just incredible. And did the same with District 6, I think.
Yeah, District 6, and then of course Eastwood on the outskirts of Pretoria.
Yes.
He, between 1938 and 1947, which is when he went to Paris and never to return to South Africa, he lived in those three areas,
Yes.
Sophia Town, District 6, and Eastwood, none of which survived. They were all destroyed in various forms. There's this unbelievable photograph of the destruction of District 6 by David Goldblatt.
Yes.
But yes, these sort of cultural canvases, destroyed because of contemporary politics. So yes, there's an enormously important topographical and historical element to Sekoto's work. Yes, as images, they are startling and beautiful. But historically, they are so meaty and so important. You're absolutely right. How do you know what a street scene sort of wash day moment looked like in Sophia Town in 1940, 1942?
Yeah.
Well, you have to pretty much look at an image like this. He was there. He was part of that community, and he was painting it with amazing tenderness. And I always use the adjective of velvety in the way he paints these pre-exile works. The surface of these works are so loving and so velvety in the way he finishes them.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. These three potentially generations of women here, sort of hard at work, sort of getting on with it, is, I think, quite an inspirational kind of a motif.
And I mean, I think when and I love how you talk about how he expresses all these three regions in imagery. It just makes you cross what the destruction of those places has done, and that interruption. Had we been left alone, I mean, who knows what we would have been, and the fact that we will never know, for me, I think, is one of the most painful things. But the knowledge and history and lessons and I guess the celebration, and also kind of like the portrayal of those days, remain in these works. And I mean, this is why I will always, want to collect a piece if I can of this, because, he's such an important figure in the arts. And there's a lot of these works, but, like The Waiting Room, for instance. I mean, I grow up in Diepkloof, and when you go to a clinic and you watch how people file through, and it was always mainly women with children on their backs, and just, the going home field, just that whole, I guess filing and queuing again. I mean, if you go back to Sam's works and you go, just there's always formation in these works, lots of history in these works. And I mean, I love Gerard. I could talk about him, all night. But
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I must say, these 4 works are quite special. They're all pre-exile. And I have to just say right now, they are on view, in our offices in Houghton. And yes, we only sort of having people by appointment, but if you do make an appointment, you'll have all our galleries to yourself, and go and have a look, and you can spend some time in front of these pictures. We've certainly these 2 and the visitor are very close to each other in where we've hung them, and they're really remarkable, special pictures.
I mean, you might find me camped in there, Doc. Just make sure security does not allow me to drive in a big truck, because I might just I might just live there and just wake up around these works every morning. So the last, sort of 2 things that I wanted us to talk to, and I mean, we could stare at Gerard's images forever, but these 2 sculptors, Ezrom Legae and Sydney Kumalo. I mean, Sydney, he went to school in Diepkloof, man. I mean, he's my homeboy, I mean, I'm obviously way younger than he is, but he's my homeboy, and I thought I should, brag a little about, what Diepkloof has produced. We also, by the way, produced Momo Gallery, so which is really nice. Yeah. But Man on a Horse by Ezrom, for me, is a very futuristic piece of work, in the way that he does his work, So he's often depicted animals as a force of some sort, so a force of oppression, and those types of things, and perhaps the towering figure, as someone trying to rise above that, or that there is a relationship between this oppressor and oppressed. And funny enough, I came across 3 things which I will not be able to quote in verbatim, but these were words spoken by Nelson Mandela. The other were words that were spoken by Oliver Tambo, and others were the ones that were spoken by Chris Honey. And Chris was talking about, how, when, the politician becomes, or the liberator becomes the politician, and they forget their people and they start driving around in, Mercedes Benzes and that type of thing. And I'll send you this quote. I mean, it's quite a powerful quote. And one by Madiba, where, in fact, I think this was Sir Tambo, when he said, if the ANC does to you what apartheid did, then you need to do to the ANC what you did to apartheid. So kind of like those figures of, and the reason I make reference to this, and I suppose governments and change of God and all these shifts and movements, is that his figures have no faces, which means that what could be something today could be something else the next day. So that man on top of the horse, or whatever that animal figure is could be that animal the next day, kind of thing. It made me think about those themes. It was just interesting how, you know, he deliberately did not give, you know, those things a name. And
there's a sort of an anonymity to it, you know, both in terms of the creature and the figure.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, these are deeply political works, you know, incredibly powerful works. And yes, you've got, you know, art historically, you've got very clear references to the likes of Alberto Giacometti and Kenneth Armitage and Lynn Chadwick, you know, all these incredible European masters. But Ezrom makes it his own. You know, he's got a very clear and immediately recognizable signature, you know, the way he works these figures. And yes, he's dealing with the idea of man versus beast, you know, or the people versus some kind of unfair authority, this sort of continuous fight. And you're absolutely right about the anonymity of these figures. Also, they are badly edited or hindered or crippled, you know, no arms, no legs. You know, there's a huge sense of struggle in works like this, yet you know, enormously vertical and monumental and powerful. And my colleague Specs did a fantastic little video on one of our YouTube channel, you know, giving his interpretation of this work, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And you know, people should go and watch it maybe after this. But I agree with you. This is a very powerful work. I think it's one of the works that I would identify as immediately catching the eye of almost every person that's walked into our sale room. It's usually one of the first works people identify and spend some time around. It's a fantastic example and an important work.
Yeah, and last but not least, before we get some dessert there from Higgo, hope there's time for it. Another expression of femininity, but in such an elaborate sort of way, and I mean, how Sydney, you know, explains his thinking with this piece, just his depiction of a joyous posture of a woman who seems in, you know, a deep point of happiness, but like the smoothness in it, and the delicacy that it comes with, but also the strength. You know, when you look at this work, I mean, it's just all these seemingly contrasting themes are just incredible.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, bear in mind what you know, the theme you've drawn out over the last hour. You know, this kind of encapsulates so much of this incredibly solid, powerful, matriarchal figure, yet wonderfully sleek and beautiful too. You know, this work has amazing lines, and it seems so simple, yet it has a wonderful complexity in its rhythms. And you know, I've got a whole lot of different views of it, and it changes so dramatically depending on the angle at which you view it from. Also, I always like to speak about patina. You know, that surface of that bronze. You know, that tells a story in itself. You know, that wonderful sort of caramel patina. You know, and that's a fabric of history too. You know, this is a kind of work that an item that will change and age, you know, over the years and over the decades. Its colors will darken. Some areas will appear richer, some lighter. It reflects the light sort of at different angles. It's a wonderfully living work, I find.
The many facets of a woman, I guess.
Yeah.
Very beautiful works. Doug, I really enjoyed all the works. Higgo, perhaps a little bit of dessert before we go?
Yeah, so I'm guessing you'd like me to say something about Klein Constantia, which I'll gladly do, Greg. You know, as you're showing these artworks, in my very much novice view on them, something that often comes comes to mind for me when I look at the African artworks or the South African artworks is the use of light and the use of color. And I'm reminded of one of my favorite pieces of literature on Africa in general was written not by a South African or not by an African, but by a Polish writer. He's a journalist called Gerard. I don't know if you guys have heard or read any of his work.
No.
But he wrote a book about his time in Africa called Under the African Sun, and he talks about the plane leaving Europe or wherever he comes from, usually in darkness and in rain, and then the moment he gets off wherever it is on the African continent, it's just showered in light. Basically, the plane is immediately showered in sunlight, and almost doesn't matter what time of the day you embark. And the reason I'm mentioning that is that wine in general, but especially sweet wine, is something that's viewed as bottled sunlight. I mean, it's just the natural, the consumable product that shows light and nature in the best possible way. Sunlight. It's really bottled sunlight. And this is something that South Africa does really strongly because we have this wonderful constant ability to ripen the fruit, basically. And we've had this throughout the ages. So this, Vinde Constance has a history. This is South Africa's oldest wine, basically. It has a history going back to the early 19th century. So the early 1800s, there's bottlings going around from as early as that. It was resurrected by Klein Constantia in 1986 by the Jooste family at the time. And now most of Constantia are starting to realize that other producers are also introducing bottlings. But this is the most important one, is the Klein Constantia Vinde Constance. And we've sold some individual bottlings of this already on sale since last year. But this is now a comprehensive vertical view of different vintages of Vinde Constance, and they're all brilliant. They've had different winemakers and they've had different interpretations of vintages throughout the years. But maybe let's pause on the 87 now, going into that. Yeah, this we've recorked this, so you'll see on the top there on the wax, there's a little sticker on there. This was recorked by myself and Matthew Day, the cellar master, and Emerim a couple of weeks ago. So basically we opened the bottles, we looked at the condition, we topped it up with the same vintage and put a new cork in there. So it's guaranteed, it's guaranteed condition. It's going to be in a good nick. The cork is numbered and it's put on file at Klein Constantia and at Emerim. So it's an official recorking. So this wine is in a great condition. It's still very, very fresh, and it develops this sort of savory profile that you asked me to say something about dessert, but when they get this old, Greg, you can drink them for an aperitif as well. They're almost like an old sherry. They're glorious. So yeah, we've got a great spread of about 20 lots from Klein Constantia Vinde Constance. It goes up to 2011 as the youngest. All of them can still keep. I mean, I've had the privilege of having 200-year-old Constantia sweets. So they're unbreakable. They're indestructible. Maybe like some of those sculptors. They're indestructible.
I had a moment once where there was a choice, between, one of these babies and the Chate Ikem, and I had the Ikem, just so I can have this one a little longer, so just so you know how great it tastes. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, if you compare the prices, hey, I mean, I don't want to down. I don't want to down talk Chateau Ikem. It's certainly the most famous of the concerns. Personal taste preference. I think there's more going on in the bottle with Vinde Constance than with Ikem, really. And it's a fraction of the price. So South African wine still good value. It remains to be.
Listen, beyond being patriotic, it's really, really fantastic work that's gone in there, and it's right up there. In fact, I make that little comparison on purpose. But yeah, I mean, all in all, really great selection. Thank you, gentlemen. I really enjoyed this session. And thank you to Strauss and co-family for inviting me to have the conversation again about some of the things that I like, some of the things that are my favorites. I really enjoy having this chat. Higgo, great seeing you, brother. Doc, cheers. Susie, thank you.
Yeah,
everybody.
thanks so much, Greg. Yeah, from us, we're enormously
thank you,
grateful.
Greg.
You always give such an incredible insight into some of these works. And, I'll be honest, we'd spoken a little bit about the mother and child sort of theme running through our sale, but, you've pulled it out so evocatively, and, yeah, we're enormously grateful. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.